All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Up and In Show. We are somewhere in the 70s, but super excited because I have a repeat guest here. But first time in the shop because the last time we did it over Zoom, correct?
Yeah, and this place is fantastic. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. But if you guys have been listening to the podcast, you guys know Jeffrey Marx is a friend of mine, but also a Pulitzer Prize winning author and journalist. And a good friend, like I said, a friend of mine, business mentor. And I'm excited today because we're doing something a little different with Up and In. This is our first real production type thing. But it's because we're telling a story about something that I think is kind of the essential to the DNA of cards and culture, right? So something that my business partner Vito and I always wanted to do was tell a story around memorabilia, whether that was a sports card, whether it was a helmet, a football, or a shoe, right? We wanted to make sure we connected the value with the story behind it and that kind of stuff. So today we have a really interesting opportunity to talk about an iconic moment in LSU sports history and that you were a part of it in a unique way. So today I'm excited to kind of introduce you again to our podcast, to our listeners, anybody who's new to the space, but also to this story. So if you could kind of give our listeners a little introduction about you, yourself, your background, and then we'll get into the fun stuff.
Well, first of all, I love that combination because obviously I love sports.
Yes.
I've always enjoyed stories and storytelling.
Yeah. And you're okay at it. You're decent. You're okay.
Well, I've enjoyed it. And through the years, because I've been around sports really my whole life, I've collected a few things along the way as well. So when you talk about those different pieces and then you put them together in this setting, in the cards and culture setting, it's been really neat to watch you go through that process and put it all together from the idea phase to now here we are. And it's absolutely stunning. So good for you. And first of all, just to be here and be part of that journey for you has been really cool for me. So I am a writer. That's what I've done started off as a newspaper reporter, and then some magazine and freelance projects, and eventually books. And I've written 6 of them through the years.
Nice.
The most recent, which is not real recent, but the most recent is a book called Walking with Tigers, and it's a collection of LSU sports stories. So I've been very immersed in that whole LSU sports scene for a number of years now. And I can come to the specifics of the story you're talking about, or if you had something else you wanted to head toward.
Well, let's talk about Walking with Tigers because I think, to me that kind of lays the foundation of how this all started, right? Okay. And you've also continued that work, which connected us. I wasn't technically in the book, but you and I crossed paths after the book came out and got to meet each other. So kind of give a little bit of how that started, what made you want to do that, and some of the athletes that you'd come across in that.
Well, I came to Louisiana. I'm not from here. I'm from a little place, a little town northeast of here called New York. And but I ended up here because my wife, Leslie, is from Thibodaux, Louisiana. Right. And so when I came here after we got married in 2006 and I moved here from Washington, D.C., I naturally gravitated towards sports because that's what I've always gravitated toward. And obviously here in Louisiana and especially in Baton Rouge, if you're going to go to sports, that means LSU sports. And I already had some connectivity to it. A dear friend of mine is Dale Brown, who I've known since the 1980s when I was a newspaper reporter. And a guy that I go back even further with is a man named Burt Jones, who once played quarterback at LSU. I was a ball boy for the Baltimore Colts during my childhood when he was a player, a star quarterback for the Colts. So I had some sort of connection and understanding of LSU sports, but certainly that went to a much heightened level when I moved here to Baton Rouge. And once I was around it, I came to see and understand that there are just so many great stories that aren't told. No fault of the local journalism scene, but there's only so much you can do. And I had the gift of time and the freedom to spend on some of these stories that were more long form, in-depth feature type of pieces where I could literally spend a whole season or even a year working on and off with some of those athletes. Starting with some of them in high school. Leonard Fournette, his chapter we started with when he was at St. Aug in New Orleans, knowing that he was coming here. Right. Alex Bregman, we spent a whole season working on his. So it was really an incredible experience for me. I loved it. It was one of the most enjoyable projects I've ever worked on.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the names, it's worked out well, right? Like some of the names that you worked with have done some really great things in the NFL, the MLB, and stuff like that.
Yeah, right? Well, that was not the intention.
Right,
I mean, I wanted a mix. I wanted men, women, a variety of sports. Some of them are older. Some were current at the time, Alex and Leonard, of course. But it was a real mix, and that's exactly what I wanted. Just so, it turned out that, with Alex Bregman and Leonard Fournette, things turned out pretty well for those guys so far. So it's neat. It's been fun not only to see what they did here, but to follow their journeys in professional sports. It's really been pretty exciting to see what they've done.
Yeah, they've done some pretty exciting things, each of them, in their first couple of years in the leagues.
Right.
So definitely. But so all of that kind of ingrained you in the LSU sports culture and the DNA, right? And even after the book came out, your Twitter kind of branded yourself in that sense, right? As a sports, almost like the way that I met you, I kind of knew you almost, or as an athlete, thought of you as a sports journalist almost, even not knowing your previous writing career and history and things like that. So for me, it's almost like your name is synonymous with LSU sports, which I think is pretty cool, just by doing some cool work and working with some big level athletes. And that puts you in the position, right, to be in 2019 and kind of why we're here today, right?
Yeah, well, so after the book came out in 2015, but there were still so many more great stories, and they always, they're always popping up. So I just like doing those in-depth feature stories. I don't really write about the games themselves. I write about the people in their lives. That's what I enjoy the most. To do that, you really have to spend time with someone, and they have to be open to it. So there have been some cases after that. I did a piece on Cole Freeman, baseball player, one on Caleb Gilbert, baseball player, one on Lexi Priestman, All-American gymnast for LSU for a few years. And there were a few others along the way. But I had kind of backed off of that for a little bit because I was working on some other things outside of Louisiana. The 2019 football season really pulled me back in.
Yeah.
I really watched that season as a fan more than anything else. I didn't cover it as a writer in any way at all. But that changed for me the day of Joe Burrow's Heisman speech in New York.
Okay.
And I was really, really moved. I don't know if you saw that speech, but it was absolutely incredible. For anyone who hasn't, I highly recommend watching it. Not, again, for the sports stuff, but for the life stuff. Right. We saw Joe Burrow open up in a way that was really incredible. We saw him share himself. We saw him talk about his relationship with Coach O. We saw him talk about some of the issues in his hometown and home region of Ohio, some of the challenges there, especially with food shortages. And it was just very moving. My wife and I, Leslie and I, were sitting on the couch watching at home, and I was getting emotional. She was too. And then when it was over, she said, "You got to write about this. You got to write about." I'm like, seriously? Because there are not enough people already writing about Joe and Coach O at the time and about the Heisman and all that. And she said, "Yeah, but what about he talked so much about their relationship. What about that?" And I said, "I don't know. It's just I'm not in it right now, but I'm just taking this in and enjoying it." But over the next day or two, I gave it a lot of thought. That was the one promise I made to Leslie. I didn't promise her I would do it. I told her I would at least think about it. That's a good one for marriage, by the way. And I did, and I kept looking and looking. I really couldn't find any stories at all about so there were 1 million stories on Joe, 1 million on Coach O. Right. I couldn't find anything with any depth or meaning to it about their relationship. And I thought, well, since he talked about that on this national stage up at the Heisman, maybe there's something here. And so I figured I'd look into it a little. Well, I had a book signing that next day, just by chance, at Barnes & Noble. Nice. And during those couple hours I was there, I'm going to tell you that 75% of the people, I'm just picking a number, but something like that, 75% of the people who came through that line and talked to me and got books brought up the Heisman speech. "Hey, did you see Joe Burrow last night? That was incredible." And I realized as I was sitting there, this thing didn't only hit me, this hit a lot of people because the comments were incredible. Right. So I decided I was going to spend a little time. Little did I know, this happens a lot as a writer, at least it has to me. I think I'm spending a day or two on something that turns into a long-term project. And that's exactly what happened here. I started just talking to a couple people and seeing what I could learn about their relationship. The things I just kept hearing and learning, and every person I talked to opened up another little nugget or another little path to go down. And I just got into it. I ended up spending a few months on that research. And I think I probably interviewed 30 or 40 people for that piece in depth, including the Burrows, family members as well, and Coach O and Kelly and other family members and people, with the LSU football program. People that could open up an insight into their relationship other than just what we see on the field of play or in interviews at post-game press conferences and this type of thing, because that's not really where you learn about that stuff. And that's why I ended up, it's the only reason why I ended up in the Superdome the night of the national championship game, because I was working on that piece.
Wow. Well, so what was the piece going to be for? Were you going to write are you writing a book, or was it an article? Did somebody hire you?
Yeah. So originally it was going to be a piece for the LSU Sports website, lsusports.net.
Okay. Yep.
I set that up originally. The original conversation was with Michael Bonnet, who handles that for them in sports information. Yep. And then for a variety of reasons, we ended up moving it to The Advocate.
Okay.
And so The Advocate ran a 3-part series. As I say, I took a few months working on this. It didn't happen overnight. So it ended up, we pegged it to the week of the NFL draft when Joe Burrow was the first pick.
Wow.
And we ran it for 3 days. It might have been Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of that week.
That's amazing.
It was the single longest story. Now, don't ever judge, just like they say, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a story by its length. That has nothing to do with it. But it just, because I spent so much time and there was so much there that I wanted to share, other than books, it was the single longest story I think that I've ever written. There was one I did for Sports Illustrated many years ago that may have been right around the same, but certainly those two were the longest two that I've ever written on any topic.
That's awesome.
Other than a book. And it was just a pleasure to do. I enjoyed it so much. That 2019 football season was so magical. There was so much going on there. Of course, Joe and Coach O were right at the center of it all. And to learn so much about their relationship and what made them tick and what made them work so well together, and then be able to share that with people, I think that was really neat to be able to do.
No, I think it's beyond neat. I think that's, and I think too, just from the storytelling aspect, I think, the way things go in life, the right place, the right time, like, what are the chances, that you're sitting down watching the video, or the speech with Leslie, and she encourages you to do it, and then you take a step and go, just so many things had to happen for that to fall into place.
If we don't watch that speech that night, if we have plans out with friends or anything else,
or if some of your friends were there and you're not watching as intensely,
then we're definitely not sitting here talking about it today, because that really was that was the catalyst for the whole thing. It really was.
Well, that's really interesting to me, because I love to understand just how things come about, right? The story, like I think you and I, the reason we've connected is because our brains probably work similar in that sense.
That's scary,
analyst, right? I like, why did you want to write that article? Like, boom, 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 and it traces back to like one moment. That's it. That's the cool part to me, is like that's the moment. So,
well, I'll tell you, Anthony, as a young newspaper reporter many years ago, I always thought you had to pick a story and go research it and write it. Like you kind of plan something and then you go do it. But the more time I spent around writing, both as a newspaper reporter and later with more long-term projects, I came to realize that the stories that meant the most to me, and hopefully to readers as well, were stories that had no plan whatsoever. I didn't go find them intentionally. They just kind of happened either to me or in front of me, or somehow I stumbled across them. A lot of times it's out, you're looking for one thing and you learn something else entirely, and that's what you end up going down that path. As a writer, those have been the stories that have brought me the most interest and joy.
Yeah, well, I think it's because on the other end, the reader feels that organic nature of it, right? Like, I mean, you can, in my opinion, and I might be a little biased as an athlete, right? If you have the same reporter trying to force a story down your throat that you don't even resonate with or whatever, right? There's an energy there. But if all of a sudden, if something just comes to fruition naturally and saying, hey, look, this is something that I saw, boom, 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 it just has an energy about it that aligns properly, right?
Right.
And it aligns to be where you're taking a picture at one of the most iconic moments in sports history, LSU sports history, right?
Right.
So I think it's amazing, and that's why I'm grateful that I'm sitting here and a part of this journey with you, and have this opportunity to do this and tell this story and have this asset in here, because I'm not a huge football fan. I've learned to become a football fan through LSU and the history and the tradition and being an LSU athlete. So now to have it come full circle and have one of the coolest assets, I think, in town, be here in my shop telling the story around it is pretty amazing. So let's dive in a little bit about that moment, how you got that opportunity, and tell everybody exactly what we're talking about. Because we'll pull the photo out, we'll pull the canvas out, I'll show it in front of the camera, and obviously people will know what we're selling here. But I I think that this moment is something that we've talked about for a long time, whether that was talking about making it a digital NFT, just telling it, as a story, or like we're talking about eventually selling a piece in the shop. So
right.
Tell everybody a little bit about that moment, how you came about it.
Yeah. Well, first the moment and the photo you're talking about is the Victory Cigar, as we call it, Victory Cigar photo of Joe Burrow.
For the listeners and the watchers.
And
this is the cool little, I don't know if this is in the middle of the video. What we got here? That's good. Nice.
And so, yeah, you mentioned a few minutes ago, Anthony, in a different context, you said being in the right place at the right time.
Right.
And what's funny to me about this little story, looking back on it, is it would be perfectly fine if I just had ended up in the right place at the right time tied to this. But actually, I enjoy this more because I was actually in the wrong place at the right time.
Okay.
Because I was somewhere I didn't really belong, and it was unintentional. It was totally unintentional. So what happened was, after the game was over, LSU wins the national championship. They beat Clemson. They crush them.
Yep.
Great game, great celebration for the whole state of Louisiana. It was a pretty incredible place to be the night of January 13, 2020.
Yep.
And they have the celebration on the field afterwards. They do all the TV stuff that they do on the field, on the platform, and presenting the trophy and all that stuff. And then there's still a little time in between. And then, you start hearing through the media folks that the press conference is going to be starting soon. Well, I was underneath. I had never, I say never, I can't think of any other games I've covered at the Superdome. There might have been at some point long ago, but I'd been there a few times, but I don't know that I really knew my way around. And so I didn't know where the media session was going to be held. And so I started looking around. There's, in the corridors underneath, underneath the dome, in the back halls and everything. And I start looking around, and I'm asking people from the dome, I'm asking people from LSU, I'm asking other media people, and no one seemed to know where this room was that they were going to be having the post-game press conference. So I ended up getting a little nervous, like I was going to miss it, the whole thing. And not a huge deal, because obviously it's all recorded these days. I could watch it later, but you want to be there to pick up detail. You might catch a little something you don't see on the video. And I didn't know what to do. So I went back and forth several times. Okay, I'm going to miss this thing. Finally, I decided, what if I go to the LSU locker room? Coach O and Joe hadn't come out yet. I figured they have to come out at some point, and I can just follow them. At least they'll know where this thing is. So it's exactly what I did. I headed back toward the locker room. It was still closed off. But just by chance, right about the time I got there, the doors opened, and out came Coach O and Joe and Michael Bonnet, sports information director. Perfect. I just follow them. They know where they're going for this thing. So I follow them down the hall. We take a left, we take a right, there's a door, they open it, we walk in. This whole time there's all this crowd around and everything, and the big buzz, but I just kept following them as if I knew where I was going or what I was doing, or that I even should have been there. And I thought they were just going to lead me into the press conference, but before I knew it, I looked up, and we were in this little back room, and there was a couch, much like this one, only it was black. It was a black couch, and just the temporary makeshift little holding room that they had.
Right.
Dabo Sweeney, the Clemson coach, was still up at in the press conference,
doing his thing,
answering questions. So there was a short hold time there for Joe and Coach O. There were a few other people there. Kelly was back there. Kelly Ogeron, Michael Bonnet, Gordy Rush was there for a couple minutes. Verge, I remember seeing Verge Osbury there for a couple minutes. A state trooper and one other security guy. So I want to say there were about 6 or 7 people there. Yeah. And one LSU sports information employee or athletic department employee. I don't know exactly who he works for, but he was shooting video.
As a videographer.
I guess he follows Joe around at that time, following him everywhere to document everything that was going on. So, I said to Michael, Bonnet, I apologize. I didn't mean to be in here. He says, no, you're fine. You're fine. And so I think my guess is, I never asked him this, but my guess is, because I was working on what I was, and because we had a relationship of trust and understanding that he was okay with that. Yeah. So now Coach O, I knew a little bit, not well. Kelly, I knew a little bit, not well. Joe, I didn't know at all. Yeah. We had met a couple times and spoken very briefly, but certainly no relationship at all. Right. But it was all very comfortable. It was a private little back behind the scenes setting. And but for the video guy who was sitting on the floor right in front of the couch, taking video of Joe like pretty much nonstop.
Yeah.
And Joe was smoking this cigar, which, you know, wearing a full football uniform, still in gear, and smoking a cigar, you just don't see that very often. Yeah. And I thought, well, that's pretty neat. And I didn't actually ask Joe. I figured he was fine with it because here was a guy sitting 3 feet in front of him taking video nonstop.
Right.
So I just pulled out my phone and took a few pictures. And, you know, I'm not a photographer by any means. I also am the worst technology person in North American history. So I was lucky the pictures even came out.
Right.
And when I looked at them a couple minutes later, I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. The only reason I took it was, number one, it was such an unusual thing to see.
Right.
And number two, I thought, wow, people out there aren't getting to see this. And LSU sports fans love this stuff so much. Anything related to football, anything related to Joe and Coach O at the time. And I thought, man, people might really enjoy this. So I'm going to go ahead. I picked one that I thought was the best of the 6, 7, or 8 that I took. And I just tweeted it out. And all it said, if I recall, it just said, victory cigar, hashtag LSU, hashtag Burrow, with the EAUX like his jersey had that time. If I remember correctly, that's all it was.
Yeah.
And from there, I didn't know it right away because then I put the phone back in my pocket and went about my business. I'm a lot more comfortable with a notebook and a pen, which I had, than I am with a phone and a Twitter. And so that was that until the press conference was over. And then I looked at the phone again and realized what was going on with this thing. So that was 12:04. I looked at this later. I was just curious when I was piecing it back together. It was 12:04 when I actually took the photo. So 4 minutes, you know, after midnight.
Yeah.
And then 2 minutes later when I tweeted that thing, I don't recall how long the press conference went, but when it was over and I looked at that phone again, things were going a little nutty.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I don't want to say you're the worst in North America, but you're probably top 5 in technology. We need to.
I think that would be bottom. I think bottom 5 would be the proper.
The top 5 worst, I guess.
There you go.
You're right. Bottom 5.
Yeah.
No, that's right. You're getting technical.
I want to claim it as my own. I do want to claim it.
No, you're getting good. We've been texting. We've been doing some good stuff, and it's all right. We're getting there. But I do think it is ironic and funny that you said that because you put your phone in your pocket and you have no idea the shitstorm almost that you created, you know, but in a good way, like in the media frenzy of like, oh my God, it's happening. And then when Will dropped that video, I think it probably even escalated your picture a little bit more to be like, wow, that was the moment, right, of this iconic video too. So it's pretty cool to hear your side of it, knowing that I saw Will Stout's video, which was the victory, you know, the one that went pretty crazy, I think.
Okay.
Maybe it wasn't him.
I want to clarify because it wasn't Will.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Will is fantastic and his stuff was incredible, but unfortunately I'm drawing a blank right now. He was a young guy from LSU.
Gotcha.
As I say, worked in their athletic department. His name is escaping me right now with my tired old brain that I bring with me, but it was not Will.
Okay.
So I don't want to.
No, that's very fair.
And we'll have to come up. I have the other guy's name, and we'll get it out there because I want him to get the proper credit.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, that was it. That was that night, and then that was the craziness. And it wasn't until I was really after the press conference, I went back on the field because Coach O was doing a couple things out there. Joe was as well. Just kind of observed them. Then I left to walk to my car and drive back to Baton Rouge. And it wasn't until I was walking out of the Superdome that I really looked at it and started realizing, you know, really my stepdaughter, Alex, who lives in New York City, she was the one texting me, letting me know that this thing's going nuts and what's going on and all this. And it was really fun. She was having fun with it. And it was interesting to watch it unfold.
What was the most crazy moment of that? Like the sharing, the stories, sports, like people resharing it, all that stuff. Do you remember anything that captures, sticks in your mind?
No, just the volume, I guess, more than anything. So it wasn't so much even what happened with my own tweet, which, you know, did a lot of stuff, but it was more people just stealing the picture from it and then doing their own thing. So I didn't realize that until the next couple of days. I started learning a lot more about what happens with something like that. And when I started seeing some of the numbers there, I realized why this thing was doing what it was doing, because it was, you know, Bleacher Report, Barstool Sports, Sports Illustrated, Fox Sports, some of the NFL memes was one of the big. I'm not familiar with all these things, but I learned a lot about them over the next few days, and they were the ones that generated the huge numbers because I guess they have such a bigger audience.
Right.
And from there, it's what led to a lot of the other things that unfolded.
Right.
When you say the one thing that sticks out, and this isn't necessarily immediate, but it was a week after the game. So the game was the following Monday when I saw for the first time this piece of artwork that had been done. I had seen several that had popped up, unauthorized, all of them, of course, initially.
Yeah.
And that was another part of the learning experience here. What happens in terms of when you own the copyright to any kind of property, I guess, but especially nowadays with the internet and the way it works and the way people take a photo and do anything they want with it, no matter what it violates. So learned a lot about that as we move forward. But I think it was that art piece that came out of an artist in Pennsylvania named Jordan Spector that was really one of the turning points, at least for me, in the way that I was approaching this whole thing and the way I thought I had to.
We'll dive into, and honestly, the way we first started talking about this picture was back in February when NFTs started coming around, right? And we started understanding that you can almost verify photos now on the blockchain. But talk to me a little bit about that process. What is the process to copyright things like that, and how does that work going forward?
Yeah, so I had no idea. First of all,
especially on like a Twitter post.
Yeah, so it doesn't. And what I learned is that when you quote publish something on Twitter, you put it out there on Twitter, you're in effect, you're publishing it just like you're publishing it in a newspaper, book, or anywhere else. So, but what I learned from a photographer friend of mine, I ended up calling one of my, not lifelong, but adult lifelong friends, a man named Charles Bertram. He's a photographer in Lexington, Kentucky. Okay. And we worked together in my first job out of school. He was a top-notch photographer, and I was a fledgling rookie reporter trying to find my way. Nice. And it just turned out over a couple of years, he and I became real good friends. We ended up working on so many stories together. So he was the first guy I turned to because he knows about this stuff. And I called Charles and I explained to him what was going on. And he said, yeah, well, when you take the photo, you own the rights to that photo the moment you take it. I didn't know how any of that works. So, but then he explained to me that you really ought to go through the copyright process as well as a further protection, just to legally formalize it. And he put me on to a professional organization called the National Press Photographers Association. He put me in touch with the right people, and their lawyer, really nice guy, just gave me the time and kindness to explain all of this to me, how to do it and how it worked. And so I did that with the Copyright and Trademark Office in Washington, D.C., and we did that. And I came to learn, though, that's good to do, but it's still, if people don't know that, or if they don't care, they're going to violate and do whatever they want. There were so many products put out there so quickly that had this image on it that it would have taken a lawyer full time for weeks just to chase all this down. And to what end? As you know from our earlier conversations, my whole goal, if we were going to do anything with this, I just wanted people to enjoy it. The turning point was that artist I mentioned, Jordan Spector in Pennsylvania, where I realized how much money he was making off this thing. It was a commercial entity at this point. Right. And my thing was, if people are going to be making money off this instead of just enjoying it, then let's at least find good ways to channel that toward a good cause. Absolutely. And that's when I entered into those conversations with Jimmy Burrow, Joe's dad, who I had gotten to know through the process of working on the story, and really kind guy, and talked it all through with him. He was fully supportive of what I wanted to do. And the first two things we did was we contacted Jordan. I had my lawyer do that, so I didn't have to get in the middle of all that, but he handled the business end of that and took care of it to where the royalties that would be coming to me for that photo, we put directly toward two charities, so that I would never even touch them. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to touch it. I just wanted them to go to something good. Yep. And it all goes back to that night watching Joe's Heisman speech again, because one of the two beneficiaries that we decided right away was going to be the food bank. That's amazing. In Ohio that Joe had, been raising money for already. So Jimmy Burrow loved that idea. And then I said, I'd love to have one in Louisiana too. So we picked Dreams Come True of Louisiana, which is an organization that does a lot with LSU Sports as well, a really great cause. And so, once we had that put together, it allowed me to feel a lot better about it, because honestly, it kind of ticked me off in the beginning when I saw people. It wasn't that taking it and using it for fun. Right. It was taking it and using it improperly to make money for yourself. Right. That was the turning point for me, and that's what kind of aggravated me. So then we got it moving in a good direction. Jordan ended up being a great guy. Once we talked to him, he's raised a lot of money, not only for himself with that artwork, but also for these two charities. And then we did the T-shirts, the Victory Cigar T-shirts, with Bayou Apparel here in Baton Rouge. Yep. A man named Dan McNamara has done a great job with that. And there have been so many other products. The others are not authorized. There have been so many where people have taken the image and then used it. Some of those we've chased down. Some of it, you just let it go after a while. I didn't want to spend a lifetime chasing down, Joe Burrow cigar photo usage. So we've moved on to other things, but it does have a way of just keep coming up. And as long as we can keep doing fun things with it for good causes, then I think that's a beautiful thing.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's amazing how, in a business savvy sense, you tied it back to charities, right? If somebody was going to do this stuff anyway, people are going to, create art and great things, creative things, which they should. They have a right to do that. Let's just make sure that it ties back to the right things, and the people that, put this stuff in place, get their right. Right. So I commend you on that, and that's why I was so excited to be a part of this project. The secondary way, in the next phase, you said, okay, now we want to tell the story the right way and kind of present it to Baton Rouge and allow people to partake in the experience almost, in the right way. So I was honored almost that you wanted Cards and Culture to be a part of that and treat it as a memorabilia piece.
Well, that's because of you. Well, so let me just I want people to understand this. So that's all about the kind of person you are. That's about the way you've approached this whole journey of yours. It's the way you approach everything. It's the way you approach people, the way you shared yourself with so many people here in Louisiana from the time you came here from New Jersey to Louisiana.
Yes.
And, that stuff matters. And when you share yourself with the community the way you have, when you enter into the kind of relationships with the kind of integrity and trust that you do, those things matter over time. And so it was from you that I learned about the whole NFT thing. And if you recall, that was our first conversation about this. When you started explaining that to me, and I started researching on my own and realizing, my goodness, what is happening with this stuff, especially related to sports. Yep. And then remember, one of the first things we talked about was this photo. Well, what do we do with this? Yep. Because obviously, based on some of the things we've seen out there and the money that they've brought in, holy cow, you just can't imagine some of this stuff. You can because you're into it. Yeah. I couldn't because I wasn't into it, but now that I've done the research, it's really blown me away. So that was our first thought, and I said right away, as long as we do this the right way, then I'm open to it, and that's what I want to do. And it's the same thing with the photos. So the number of requests that have come in for that photo, and I just haven't, up until this point, hadn't found the right way that I was comfortable enough to do that. And so it was through our conversations that I realized I know you and I know the way you'll handle it, and we're going to put it to a good cause as well. And so, there's the right way to do something, the wrong, and our goal together was to do this the right way. So I've always wanted to tell the story the right way, and I've always wanted, if anyone wants to enjoy the photo over time, that's great. I love that. It's fun. It's fun that happened. Yep. But I just didn't like the feel of other people taking it when it's not theirs and then using it commercially and only for their own gain.
Right. That's leveraging themselves. Yeah.
That's the part that didn't feel right. So it's fun. It's been, and just talking it through.
Yeah.
We've been brainstorming on this and learning about the different ways to do some of this and some of the approaches you've taken here with Cards and Culture and how we're going to put all that together and integrate it. I think it's going to be kind of cool.
It's one of the things that I've been most excited about. I know all the Cards and Culture's employees have been asking me, when are we putting these out? So I'm excited about it too. And first and foremost, thank you for the kind words and for trusting us to do this and myself to do this and be a part of it. So, and I think we're doing it the right way. Like you said, is we've created an affordable price point for people with a really unique piece of memorabilia. We've done a great job telling the story behind it, creating the significance, understanding the value, understanding how it was, it came to light, and putting that historical value behind it. And I think it's an honor for me to be the exclusive, this, I guess, seller of this piece of
the exclusive.
Yeah.
How did we come up with the exclusive retailer?
Yes,
through Christmas, from now through Christmas.
Yep.
And then we're going to kind of see where we are with it, see what makes sense, see what we're doing with the other pieces that we've talked about.
Yep.
And, you know, we may do it just for that time period. We may go and grow. We'll just have to see how, and I want to see how people respond to it, because I think that's been one of the things that's so much fun. It's never stopped. I mean, this is the strangest thing for me, Anthony. So everything up to this point has been reactive. And this is the first thing we're doing that's proactive.
Nice.
And that's why I'm really interested to see with you behind it and with you sharing the way you do. It's going to be fun to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I think so too. And so we're going to start with the 100 pieces of the canvas, right? The nice canvas. So there was 100.
Actually, I think we have 100 on the photo paper.
Yep.
And then 20, I think we have on the canvas.
Right, on the canvas.
Right.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
They're the same size.
Yes, they're the same size. So there's actually 20 of the canvas pieces on the wood that you can hang up, you know, on your wall, that kind of stuff. But then there's an actual print, 100 of them, right?
Right.
That you can put in a frame. 12 by 18, I think, is the size that we went with.
I think they're 10 by 18.
10 by 18.
And then the paper one, so that one is just what it is. It's canvas mounted on the whatever you call that stuff that you mount it on when you're mounting canvas on the board. Yeah. And then you can tell I know about as much about art as I do technology. So with the canvas, and then the ones on the photo paper, we intentionally, they're also the photo itself, the image is 10 by 18, and then we put that 1-inch white border for framing. So really going to be nice for framing. And people have been doing that, as I say, improperly. Now we've set it up for them where they can come to your shop, order it however they do through your website or whatever. And we'll see what happens. We're going to do that first 20 and that first 100. Yep. And then from there, we'll see what we want to do with it.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be fun because we can tie it in with, you know, in-person experiences to meet you in the shop, you know, as things kind of open up and the public gets more, you know, available and experiences start taking shape. I think the exciting part too is we originally started this talking about NFTs, and I think the unique thing we're talking about, the whole full story of this, is verifying it on the blockchain would be something really cool, and then creating a campaign almost to create value around that actual tweet. So we talk about it, there's a bunch of memorabilia about it, but then you have the rights to the actual tweet and the picture that you actually took. Right. And then if we tie that into maybe a yearly experience where maybe you and I take somebody out to a game and we sit up in a suite and we go out to dinner with them, you know, as the token holder of that tweet, that would be something where we get to experience still, you know, the moment. You can share in the moment with somebody else and they get that experience too. And then they can sell it to somebody else and we can do that in perpetuity. I think would be a really cool project. So I know we've talked, you know, baby steps.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm open to whatever creative things you come up with, because this is your stuff. Yeah. I do the best I can to make words into a sentence into a paragraph, and a paragraph into pages. So, but I'll leave that stuff to you. Awesome. But it's been fun kicking around. I love, you know, following this whole journey for you has been great. So it'll be really fun to see what you come up with, and it'll be fun to kick it around. And then we may be even able to, you know, include some of the other athletes that we've had some good relationships with through the years, as we've discussed. So it'll be a neat journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for telling the story. Thank you for trusting us with the memorabilia, the assets, and all of this. So it's going to be definitely a fun journey the next couple months, and hopefully making this a project, you know, in perpetuity. So thank you for the time.
My pleasure. Thanks, Anthony.
Yep.